analysis, as much as you would like to create an Islamic State, that in itself is going to not end the violence or bring peace, but is going to be the cause of more conflict, more damage, more loss, because it's not just a case. I don't think that it's just a case.
People who want an Islamic State are going to continue fighting for it.
You see, exactly, and I don't think it would just be a case of that a Druze or a Christian or are going to be disenfranchised by this. There's going to be a power struggle within the Muslim community itself. And so that following that particular thesis or ideology, where people should be free to practice their religion, should be absolutely free to hold their beliefs, that the imposition of one particular form of belief over all others will in itself be a cause and a source of friction into the future should that happen.
True.
That I see that, from our own dynamic here, that sometimes the rule of a majority or the position of a majority, in terms of even though it's couched in the democratic vote, becomes a form of majoritarian rule that disenfranchises everybody else. And then you have a whole section of the population that become disgruntled. And there's always this cause to incite friction and violence. And that's something that when you see the fabric of Syrian society, both ethnically and religiously being divided and falling in different directions, and the problems that has, the potential to continue destruction, regardless of whoever comes to power, if that isn't resolved, if that isn't calmed down, if that isn't sorted out in an amicable way that can show mutual respect to all, it's only going to be a cause of further mayhem and further violence into the future. So that's just the comment I wanted to make before I finish my part of the contribution. Thanks.
But and this is why I believe that during a constituent phase, you're going to have the agreement on principles, values. You're not going to say we're going to make it an Islamic state, we're going to make it a secular state, and all of these things. Because first, what you have to do is you have to establish the principle of let's say, equality.
That is a value.
Islam is a value for some of the people in Syria, but not for all. But all of the people in Syria might say they want to have equality. They want.
No one is saying a Christian has to convert to Islam. No one's saying that. No.
Did I say this?
The only religion,
No, you're assuming. I believe that what you are assuming, you're already designing the type of state. We're not at that point yet. You can't get to that point before the post-war. I mean, the country I live in, we had the same period. We were under fascism for 20 years. During fascism, you had the law of a sole leader and a sole party. And some of these laws were absurd. Of course, they did some things that still remain today. For example, the agrarian reform and things like this. That in some way we're walking into the modernity of trying to pull Italy out of a strictly agricultural society and into an industrialized society. So, this was a contribution, let's just say, during that period. Might have been also just the Industrial Revolution, I don't know. But the point is, after fascism, what happened? You had to tear everything down, because there were no laws. There was no cohesiveness. You had the post-war destruction and all of these things. So what happens after a oppressive system is in power for a long time, that doesn't have rule of law, and then you have a war, you have the post-war phase, which is a phase that is a constituent phase, and what happens is you gather together people that represent all aspects of the society that are living in that geographic place during the post-war. So this is what happened. You had people from some were excluded in Italy, for example, the fascists Baptists were excluded from the constituent phase. They weren't allowed to make the constitution. But I believe that in Syria, the Baptists are going to be allowed. I mean, I could be wrong. It could be, who knows what's going to happen. It may be that they're excluded if the kind of defeat that they suffer is of a certain kind of total defeat. If the sooner that they end all of this, the more chance they're going to have of participating. The longer that they drag it on, the more they're going to be excluded from a future Syria. So in a future Syria, what's going to happen? You're going to have the constituency that gets together and says we want to establish the Syria on, for example, rule of law, equality. Let's say equality in education. This is going to be our position on foreign affairs. This is, all of these kind of principles. The resolution of the post-war vendetta phase. Justice, rebuilding justice, so has a justice system, and all these things. So, to your eyes, it's the way that the majority, since the majority of the country is Islamic, and you like the Islamic system, you just assume that first we introduce the Islamic system and these values just follow. And I'm saying that this is not exactly how it works in a pluralistic society, in a post-war situation. It might be a different situation if you have the absolute majority, of people recognizing the same exact religion and having the same language and all of these things, but this is not absolutely the case in Syria. So proposing this is going to be problematic. And I really think that if you're hoping for what you want to happen, for this to be the reality of the situation, you'll probably have to look at more at the way that it's perceived within Syria, because you're talking about people in Egypt, in your circle, and the people that you associate with are you're against democracy and all of these things. So of course engage in people that share your views. So of course they're going to have a view, and I engage.
That's not necessarily.
No, I mean I could be wrong. You might engage with strictly
like,
secular people. I don't know, but you yourself had said, the people that you speak with, were of this point of view, and I happen to have the people that I speak with. The ones in Italy are, you probably, I don't know if you know the constitution of the Syrian community in here in Italy. But almost all of them have come here in the 1960s when they were basically they came here to study, and then being in the situation of the crackdown of the Muslim Brotherhood, they did not return because it would have been dangerous for them. So they came here and they lived in Italy, and they maintained their ties with Syria, but most of them were never able to go back to Syria. But on the same token, while a lot of them are, of course, completely assimilated into Italian society, they speak Italian better than I do, they are socially involved in they're 100% Italian people. They also at the same time have the element, of the combination of secularism and the past of political desire to see the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, have some political. I'm not saying to have all the power, like a lot of opponents are going to try and say. But the thing is, I mean, you can be in favor of Islamic people having elements of Islamic law, and also having the desire for a pluralistic democracy that is inclusive of other ideas.
Maybe in your I understand that in your mind that's true, and I understand that in the Western mentality, yeah, you can a very clean and simple separation of, at least in America, they call it separation of church and state, or separation of religion and government. But that does not have the exact same connotation in not just the Middle East, but the whole Muslim world. I mean, there's a difference between. I mean, I don't know if I can word this exactly how I want to word it, but there's a big difference between the people's desires for certain things and the way that things should be, and the way that things have to be, and the way that things people are going to fight to get. You know, they're going to continue to fight to get these things. So, just for to, I'm not sure.
No,
if
Al
Al
is
is
left.
still, no, he's
Al
left,
didn't even give us a chance to respond.
Yeah, he didn't want to hear it. But that's
No,
fine.
no,
You
he
know,
didn't.
and, you know,
Alone, he
wanna
didn't
I
say
appreciate,
goodbye. So this is.
Yeah, I appreciate you actually on this from the perspective of principles and fundamentals, rather than seeing like the chat room they're speaking about this law or that law or so forth. But it's important that we stick to the fundamentals, because the next stage, as you eloquently put it, the next stage after the war's over is reconciliation, or sitting down and talking about what's going to happen next. You know, and that has to come from the ground up. Has to be from fundamentals. So I'm also trying to speak from that. Like I said before, I might be an idealist. I'm not sure if that's actually the right word for me, but I do have my ideals, and I do believe that I want certain things to be a certain way. But I'm also realistic, and I know that they're never going to be the exact way that not just I want them to be, but even the way I expect them to be. There's many times in my life that I've planned something to go a certain way, and it went a completely different way. So, and I think that that's the case in every society. Now, having said that, you know, I think a lot of the issue on a fundamental level is that, you know, we're saying, well, people can have, you know, people can follow their religion and at the same time have a secular government. In Islam, that doesn't work. It's impossible. I mean, it is entirely impossible. For the people who read the Quran, like I mentioned about the ijma, the consensus, there's consensus upon certain things from all the sects. You want to talk about the different sects, whether you're talking about the Sunni and Shia, or the Khawarij and the Murjia, or the Hanafi and Hanbali and Maliki and so forth, the Shafi'iyya and the Sufiya and everything. When you look at all of these different groups, and you realize that they all agree upon certain principles. Certainly, a person who's not educated in any of them, I'm talking about Muslims who are not educated in any of this, they haven't actually sat down and studied their own beliefs. And this is common, I'm sure you, in Italy, I'm sure there's plenty of Catholics who don't know much about Catholicism, but they go along with what's been told to them. But they're actually very erudite in understanding it. And the same can be said for Muslims. There's a lot of people who might be chanting that they want certain things, but if they were to actually be taught, you know, your religion says something else, they're more concerned following their religion. A lot of them, especially if it's not their actual desire. Please listen. Even if it's not their actual desire, a lot of them will just follow in the footsteps of their parents and their local leaders and so forth, and they'll want that, because that's the mentality. A lot of people in this area of the world, they have closer family bonds than elsewhere. But at the same time, just saying that in Islam, for example, it says in the Quran, "In al-hukmu illa lillah," and this is a very clear and, you know, basic fundamental principle that is shared by everybody in Islam. It means that legislation, ruling, and making decisions of a legal nature is only for Allah. It's not for humans. It's not for any human being. This is only for Allah. So therefore, the laws, if someone says, "I'm a Muslim," he has to accept this, and he has to go against anybody who says anything else, or go against the belief of anything else. So if someone says, "Well, we make our own laws," he's going against Islam to the point where he is, according to the consensus of all Muslims, he is no longer a Muslim for doing that. If he believes in legislation, if he believes in being allowed to make up his own rules, make up his own religion as he goes along. To us, religion and rules mean the same thing. Religion and law means the same thing. It's not two separate entities.
Well, of course.
And I'm speaking because what I see is that a lot of people don't realize. They think that if we just all accept, or if there's a group, a large majority of people who just accept, we'll have a pluralistic society where the Alawis and so forth and the Sunnis can all sit down and we can discuss the way we want things to be, and you take a little bit of what the Shia say and a little bit of what the Sunnis say and a little bit of what the Christians say and so forth, and we'll make up our own system.
No, it's not making a
There's
soup
always
of
going
things.
to be
No. No, I
No, I know, but
understand me on this.
it's going to be compromise. There's going to be compromise. Is there not going to be?
No,
compromise?
we're talking about. No. The thing is, it's not. Let's take a bit of this and take a bit of that and take a bit of that. I mean, you can't. We're talking about
but it's
belief
they will
systems.
have to
So
compromise.
belief systems are either purist systems, or they have levels of diversion from the purist point of view. And purists believe that they're right, and those who are not purists. There are people who are Sunni who believe in Allah just as much as you do, but they have a completely different viewpoint as to how their life lived, and about the level of invasiveness, let's say,
and I'm not trying to sound like I'm an elitist or anything else, or I just know better than other people. That's not my point. My point, though, is that, for example, in America, for example, a lawyer studies law for 10 years, and if he's going to address people and he's going to talk about legal issues, or you have somebody who hasn't really even studied law, American law, one day in his life, and he's going to start talking about legal issues, you're going to see a fairly different narrative going on. And one's going to be based upon what their simple desires are, or what they think it should be, or how they assume it is, and the other is based upon scholastic knowledge, and he's actually looked into the matter.
Okay.
And I'm not just talking about
probably,
myself, but there are plenty of people who looked into these things.
Okay, you probably know a lot about Hebraism and Christianity as well. I mean, I'm sure you're exposed at least to some of their thought, and one of the thoughts is there's the Levitic school, the more strict dogmatic legalist, or other schools, and Jesus was of course a continuation of the Hebraic school of thought, and he was more the law is something, but the only law is to love God and to love your neighbor as you love yourself. He says the other laws are not, so he was going from a transformation of a legalistic, was a religiously based, this was their law, except for the occupation periods. So, but the thing is, when we're talking about, you're talking about the Sunni as being law, and this is the way it is, and the lawyer and all of these things would know what the law is. Can I please finish this thing about law? There are also varieties of law. I mean, you have precedent-based law, and then you have a law that's based on the books and the statutes. So society as a whole has moved much more, with the evolution and the mixing of people and the let's say contamination of different viewpoints and different cultures. People who were from Islamic societies going to societies that were more secular, and then coming back to Islamic societies, and vice versa. You're probably a revert, so you came from a secular into Islamic society. If you should move to the West, you in yourself would be going back into a secular society. But you inside of yourself, of course, are going to continue to follow what to you is the law, right? Because this is your belief. But the point is that these societies, I'm not talking about every individual within the society anymore. I'm talking about the society themselves has transformed itself from a law based on the written statutes more into one based on precedent. And precedent is achieved by the last sentence, the last judgment of these things. And I think religion, in a lot of ways, it transforms itself. So you, of course, your point of view that of course, the Islamic society that you're hoping to see is going to be a certain way. I believe that this is untrue simply because of the people, the Syrians that I know, that are, they would never say they're less Muslim than you are or someone else. I mean, they recognize themselves as completely as Muslims, but they're going to, they have points of view that would want, for example, to have a much more pluralistic and, let's just say, a more democratic kind of governance happening to them because of the experiences that they have of having lived in the European society that they want to bring with them. This is, of course, natural, and this is how societies develop. But one other thing that I would like to state is I, of course, realize that the Syrian society is, has got religion as an important element. This is, people they recognize themselves as religious. I do know a lot of non-religious Syrians as well, but of course they are within, the groups of the Sunni or the Christians, or they were born as Druze or whatever, but they do not themselves worship. But the point that I wanted to make is I think that since the outbreak of the tragedy in Syria, that I think there's been a radicalization of religion, because people who before had hoped to have some kind of assistance from the government will protect them, or the international community will protect them, or the Arab nations will protect them, or the Arab League will protect them, or the Lebanese will protect them, or whatever. A long they had hoped. And at this point, what is the thing that everyone is saying? The opposition. Our only hope is God. They believe that we can't count on mankind. We can only count on God. So I think that this was not a situation that existed before. I think that the prolonging of the suffering and the lack of succor from the outside world is radicalizing any kind of religious sentiment that, of course, had already existed. And I think it's turning it into one as excluding the other sources of comfort and aid, simply because all these other sources are denying them what is their right, to obtain, which is protection and support.
Right, and I could take issue with, I think, the choice of your words. Talking about they became radicalized because they didn't have any support outside or their neighbors or so forth. And
is there a problem with radical?
To call upon God for help as if that's radical. That's regular. That's normal. People will do throughout history. Whenever they need help, they call upon God.
Of course, God is a part of life. They thank God and they talk to God and they pray to God, and I'm not denying that this is that this is happening. But what I'm saying is, before you would have world community help us, Obama help us,
and
now
they realize that that's more extreme. It's more extreme to rely on America. It's more extreme to rely upon the Arab League, because they're not.
Well, I don't know if the word is extreme, but their choices have.
You use radical, I'll use extreme.
No, radical. What goes? If we're talking in a philological sense, down to the root. It's not.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So the society, of course, in a religious way, they have radicalized themselves. The root is, they're more urgent, less legally based relationship, more, let's say, even human and personal. But the point is that it's the first.
Can I make just a small point? Actually, it's kind of maybe changing the subject slightly, but actually I think it's somewhat related. I wanted to mention again. You said that you think that the way that I think that an Islamic State would be and so forth would not be how it actually is, and that's actually the point I was saying as well before. But I do want to mention that there's a large misconception. You mentioned a Sunni form of an Islamic school. There's a large misconception as to exactly what it means to have a khilafah. And I say Islamic State. I prefer saying khilafah, but it's just easier on the tongue, I guess, to say Islamic State for most listeners. But when we discuss these things, if we actually look back in history and see how these were actually applied, it was not as people are trying to make it out to be. For example, I'll just give an example, and I use an early example because whoever does come into power in an Islamic state, or even in an Islamically inclined state, like what you'll see in other places, even here in Egypt, which is, I'd say, Islamically inclined, though not completely an Islamic state, of course. They look at the earliest generations of the Muslims, and specifically the leadership. When you see the Khalifa Umar ibn al-Khattab, in one instance, a woman committed adultery. Okay, now the punishment for adultery in Islam is well known, but at the same time, it's not to the point where there's intolerance in terms of if you find out that it's happened, that's it. Kill her on the spot, or give her lashes, or do whatever. No, it's not that. It's go to court. You have to have a case. You have to have a judge. You have to, if she requires a lawyer, she gets a lawyer, and so forth. Everything is still the system of law. Well,
would a Christian
in this
accept that?
specific instance, but let me just please explain that in this instance, that if when this woman came to Umar and she actually confessed and said, yes, she did this, but she didn't have a problem with it. She didn't think there was anything wrong with what she did. So when he consulted with others and they discussed her case, she said, or he said to the others, what should I do? One of the other notable people of the time said, you need to implement punishment and go through with it. Another person said, yes, but in Islam, a person is not held accountable for things they do not know. So you need to verify if she even knew what she was doing was wrong, if she even knew what she was doing was illegal. So when he verified that, he found out that she actually did not know this ruling, this specific ruling. And there's a background story to that, but the point being is that he did not do anything to her. He let her go. Because the point is it's not as intolerant and as extreme as people are trying to make it out to be. But now, if you ask, well, would a Christian accept that? Well, first off, does everybody accept every law that's in the system in which they live, society in which they live? Of course not. But if they want to stay clear of prison and they want to stay clear of punishment, they will not do the things that are forbidden in the society. If they don't mind, they'll do what they want to do. And if they don't like it, they have choices. They can either rise up and fight and try to talk to the government. They can protest and see how far that gets them, or they can leave. I don't like to say, oh, if you don't like it, leave, because no, if you want, fight back and see who wins. And then if you can't fight back, then you've got other options. But the point being is that just because someone disagrees with the law does not mean the law should be thrown out. Especially if it's the law which is coming from the supreme being, God.
But you
God
can't.
is saying
But
this
you
is
can't
the way
have.
it's supposed to be.
But you can't impose a law that doesn't recognize the authority of the one emanating the law.
I disagree completely. I do not recognize Obama, but if I'm in America, I still have to abide by the
But
rules
we're talking
that
about.
are
But we're
during his
talking
administration.
not about
I don't
an
recognize the
elected.
American government. I don't recognize the Egyptian government. That
So
doesn't
you
matter,
believe-
though, because
okay.
you have to abide by the laws.
But Obama, if you like him or you don't like him, he was elected by a majority of
Even
people
the whole
in
system.
an
Let's say the whole
election.
system. Let's say the whole system. Even the whole system. I disagree with the concept of democracy. So just because I disagree with democracy, am I allowed to go and commit crimes?
However, can I just ask you a question? Do you believe, though, that the people who are so in opposition to the opposition to Assad, do you believe that they are encouraged by hearing I mean, I don't know if you're pro-Assad or anti-Assad. I really don't. I haven't got that clear. But do you believe that they are encouraged by hearing? No, I don't know. Honestly, you could be one or the other, actually. But the point is that no. After I'll ask you if you're willing to tell me which.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I'm interested to hear what you said. What to say.
My question, and then you can tell me, your position about Assad. And in fact, I would like to make one closing remark about Assad, because here it's kind of late and I'm going to have to close down. But the point that I had wanted to make is hearing a person who is talking about it's going to be Islamic law, and this is we're talking about adultery and all of these concepts that in some secular countries and even in some Muslim majority countries, I mean, they're ruled by a more secular law, or at least a law that's not guided by Sharia principles. So, of course, let's just talk about then if you've got Christians and secular and these people. I mean, how if they're listening to you, don't you think that they're going to say, "Well, God, Assad is absolutely right. He is the baluard of the one that's supporting secularism. He's the one that allows it that the minorities can feel protected." Isn't it kind of in a way buying straight into his narrative?
Well, if I understand exactly what you're saying, to me it goes back to, first off, to answer the question. I'm not a fan of Assad, and I'm quite against the Ba'ath Party. Everything that has to do with any type of secularism or nationalism, for example, I think is just wrong. And it's even beyond the religious.
But you're not Syrian.
Don't accept.
You're not Syrian, so I mean, you're kind of arguing this as if this is a reality that's going to happen to Syrian. So of course, if you think that it's wrong, and that of course is your right.
You're also not, as far as I know, you're Italian. You're not Syrian, but I don't think that really matters because
exactly. But I'm not telling. I've never told people that they have to have secularism or they have to have an Islamic society. I mean, have you heard me say these things? You haven't, because I've never said them.
No, at the same time, what at the same time though, I am a Muslim and we do actually have a voice and we do have a brotherhood and so.
Yes, but
it's
the
difficult
thing
for
is,
a person. Just let me answer the question, please, because this is the issue is that we have, for example, this thing called Syria that did not exist as Syria, just 100, 200 years ago. There was the Levant,
yes, I'm aware of all these things.
one body. Okay, so you know the history. So this whole Syrian or not Syrian or Arab or not Arab or so forth is, if let's say Mediterranean. Okay, good. I'm Mediterranean because I'm from Crete. Okay, my family's from Crete. Okay, so if we want to throw that in there, but then say, okay, but you're not from that region of the Mediterranean, and this is all nationalism, and this is somebody who has knowledge of a certain system that has been implemented in that area, I believe has every right to voice the support for that system. I don't think that it matters whether or not I'm from Africa or whether I'm from Japan or anywhere else. I think that that's very racial and very racist looking at things, as if we're not all humans, that we can have our own thoughts.
But don't you believe that the Syrians who are not Muslim would see that what you propose is exactly the same as the narrative that Assad is saying, that you have to fear.
I think the Syrians who are Muslims would agree with me. So I think that regardless, it works the same way. And regarding Assad,
this is your point of view, but this is I mean, you think they would agree with you, but you're not able to present any statistics about this. Okay,
if you want, I can. It's really late right now, but I go and get some Syrians just down the street and bring them here, and you can speak to them. But I mean, there's plenty of Syrians who do support this idea. Even in fact,
I'm sure there are plenty of Syrians that support all kinds of ideas.
There's Ahrar al-Sham. There's so forth. There are people who share the exact same beliefs.
Of course. I mean, why not? But the point is, you've also got a war going on because of the problem that Assad has said. As soon as I don't have the power any longer to protect you, you're going to be left at the mercy of those who are going to subject you to laws that you do not recognize.
This is whether or not I do agree that Assad tries to play on the stereotype that has been given the media about how Muslims will be under an Islamic state.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in fact, I would hope that would wake people up around the world and realize what is he talking about? The people who know better, they should say clearly he's just against the religion of Islam. It's not even about he's against Muslims or anything else, or just even against his opposition. He's against Islam as a whole, because Islam is not what he's saying it is, but he's lying against it. So the same thing I would agree that he's trying to play on the fear aspect. He's trying to make people scared, make people be so fearful that they will just run back to him, and that's his tactic. The reality that I'm saying is that, for example, under an Islamic State, if you look back in history, you realize that the Christians are left alone. Granted, if one of the Christians comes out and murders someone, he comes out and murders someone, he actually will be held accountable to the law of the land.
But do you recognize that there are large minorities inside of Syria that would fight to the last breath to not have what you're proposing to be?
Definitely, let them fight. I think that.
Okay, so would it be the best
pacifists who think that we should not have any conflict whatsoever? The conflict is necessary. I don't like it. I don't like the problems that happen. That come with the children.
So after a war, they've got to have another war so that some people can propose their.
No, in fact, if you listen to what I was saying in the other thing over a week ago about the Israeli issue, if the people really just want peace, if that's what they really want, and so many people I hear them talking about, you have to understand that Islam does necessitate fighting. There is combat in Islam. There is war. We do believe in war, and we do even in an expansionist policy. So notice how there was conquests. They were conquering lands. That will resume. I'm not denying any of that. The point is that if someone really just wants peace, they're going to have to take a step back and either surrender or realize that it's not really peace they want. It's their own understanding that they want to be implemented, and therefore they have to fight for that. I'm not making any type of threats or anything else. I'm just telling you this is the situation. There are groups of people, large, groups around the world. There are groups who share the same ideology because it's part of Islam. It's in the principles of Islam. These are principles. So there are going to be groups, whether it's Jabhat al-Nusra and so forth, that will accomplish this. They will go through with this.
Okay, so my
they need to surrender.
My kind of best case scenario would be that before you get to the point of engaging in the next war, that you do have a constituent phase where values are agreed upon, and you are saying no, we have to have the Islamic society and we have to fight for it. So these are two different points of view. So
the next phase is explaining to the people this is what Islam says, because a lot of people don't know what Islam is, even Muslims. They don't know the origin of what Islam is. So when they need to be taught, this is what your religion says, so you need to follow it.
But the minority is never going to accept it. So if you're saying you have to fight until they accept it,
if they,
you're already engaging them in your battle, not their battle.
What the Quran says.
Okay, well, if I can just, because we've been talking for several hours now, I think we're both losing our voices. But I think the one thing.
Is 11:40 only or 12:40?
It's 11:40 here. And we've also got a person talking about my hair and things like this. Someone calling, a troll talking about a picture he made of me with a donkey. And things like that, talking about a flattened face. This is the maturity at its most. But let's just talk about the one thing that I think is really kind of important, and it's a shame that Al hadn't remained until the end to talk about this, because he was basically in huge denial about the violence that is enacted by the Assad regime, and I think in a way. He's completing the Assad behavior, because Assad has had this problem, and of course the defections on high level are getting so big now, because even his chief of staff just walked out. The Cuban diplomacy just walked out yesterday. I mean, in July you had 28 diplomats that left. So there's just people are running away as fast as they can, because they see. The tide is turning. There's no way that they can keep on backing up, what the reality is showing. But the thing is that it never even occurred to the regime it could possibly be wrong. This is the thing. They're steadfast in their conviction that what they're doing is without fault, that their main goal was to just stop financing to the opposition so that it would have enough time to exterminate the opposition. So I think that it becomes at this point almost a moral obligation to. I mean, you're not going to convince every person on the Assad side to abandon him, although many are doing it from every even from his upper echelon they're leaving. But the point is, you're not going to make them change, but you're going to have to, I think, all of us kind of insist that he doesn't have the opportunity to destroy what's left of Syria, including, the infrastructure, the people, the landmarks, the society. I think that this is a human duty, not just a idea of a Muslim or an Arab or a Mediterranean, which we of course have more interest than someone in the United States would have. This is our backyard, But the point is, the regime never being able to admit that it was wrong and convincing the rest of the world that it was the necessary thing in order to keep the world from going into the Third World War or the intervention of the West and all of these things. And I do find it kind of funny when I asked if the United States was there, he points out Matthew Van Dyke, as being the United States presence in Syria. That's a classic. But the thing, Assad is not going to stop until he has completed a full genocide and destroyed everything in Syria. So I do believe that we have
he's not going to stop until people submit. I think that he's waiting for the people to submit, and it just even historically, the Alawis. I don't like calling them Alawi because there's a certain connotation to that in Islam that is incorrect. But they're Nusayri. The Nusayris have. They've been trying for many years to take power, and now that they have power, they're not about to let go. So I mean, he's someone who's scared right now. He wants to. I think deep down he knows he's his time is coming, but at the same time he can't lose face. And I don't think these are the most God-fearing people in the world. So it's not like they're even really so concerned about the atrocities they commit or anything else like that. I don't think that even registers. And I don't even think with them it's an issue of right and wrong. I don't think they understand the difference between right and wrong. I don't think it really matters to them, considering what they're doing. But at the same time, I think that it is getting late, and I'll wrap it up. And just my only closing statement is just that it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I wish that I think Al got a little bit. Heated and emotional a little too much, and that takes away from the value of the argument. And I think that it's more beneficial and constructive if we just listen to what you say. And I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know if what I want is going to actually ever be implemented in Syria. I hope it will be, but. And I think the same can be said for any type of concern. If someone says, I want the people to decide, and someone says, I don't want the people to decide, I only want a certain group of people to decide, or I only want God to decide, or I only want this to happen. Whatever, let's accept the UN resolutions or whatever. All these can talk and talk and talk, and that's what we do. And at the end of the day, we'll see what happens afterwards. I just think that from my perspective, the realistic part of my perspective, not just the ideal part, but the realistic part is that there is a group, growing group, and it hasn't ever not existed, but it's growing now, that will continue to fight until they achieve what they believe to be God's will on earth. So they will continue, and this past 60 years or so, that their numbers have been growing and growing and growing. And the last 20 years with the wars and everything else, and even during like the Afghani-Russian war, the concept of jihad and qital has been reignited amongst Muslims, and they are going to continue this until they receive one of two things that they've always wanted, one of two things that have been promised to them in the Quran. Either they're going to become martyrs or they're going to receive victory. So they're going to continue regardless, and the blessings of martyrdom are too much for, I think, a Western or a secular ideology to fight against. It's just like what one Muslim general said to the Persians before he sent an army to them and conquered them in the earliest days of Islam. He said, I will send you an army who loves death more than you love life. And that's actually what we're seeing today. That's what we're seeing about the Muslim world. Everyone in the Muslim world practically knows this saying because they hear it in the Friday prayer, in the Friday sermons and so forth. They know these things. So it's being reignited, and I don't think it's going anywhere. So on the realistic front, I think even if you do see a look at like Libya, for example, they still have armed groups and conflict as well there, because people are saying we're not going to put down our guns until we actually get what we want and what we believe God wants. And the same will happen in Syria, since there is an armed conflict. It didn't happen in Egypt because there never was an armed conflict. If there was, you'd see that it wouldn't end, and until the result was in favor of those who are fighting what they believe to be in the path of God, the path of Allah. So that's I'll end it there on my end. If you want to say anything, I'm happy to listen. But it's been a pleasure, and I thank you for the conversation.
I think we've made a lot of points today, and perhaps in the future we'll have. There were probably many more arguments that we could have talked about, but I see now that we've got this troll going on here, and whatever he's, it's kind of funny. This is actually the troll that wrote. No, he wrote an article about me saying that my fantasy is that I would be raped with a pole by him, but he wouldn't do it. So we're talking about high level. Yeah. One of those person who's got some issues. Okay, well it was a pleasure talking with you as well. Yeah. I mean, we should leave it. Okay, thanks a lot, and